People think that the banks should teach us about money. No, they shouldn't. Their job is to sell you money, whether it's capital gains, whether it's mortgage interest rates, whether it's inflation. You got to keep up with all this stuff. You look at 40-year-olds living at home with their parents. 50% of parents will still financially subsidize their kids until their 30s. When it comes to teaching about money, 2 years of finishing high school is over $20,000 of credit card debt. I bought my first car on a credit card. My credit got so bad that someone stole my identity. My credit rating got better. There's a catastrophic breakdown in the market. Our parents don't teach us about money. The school system is getting better, but they're still far from behind on what they need to do. And the banking institutions hide how money works. So where are we going to learn it?
Welcome to the Tom Storey Show with Steve Karrasch and Tom Storey, where we discuss everything real estate or whatever else is on our minds.
Welcome back to the show. This week's guest is Kevin Cochran. He's the co-founder of EnRiched Academy. We are going to speak about money today. We're going to find out if Steve's been wasting away his life by putting every penny away and not traveling and enjoying, or if I've been doing it the right way by still investing, but going out for nice dinners once in a while. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Great. Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, this is going to be a little bit different because of a lot of our guests are real estate agents, mortgage brokers, economists. Can you give our audience a bit of a background for those that don't know? I think a lot of people do know what EnRiched Academy is, but just kind of the general scope of what is EnRiched Academy.
Well, EnRiched Academy is a financial wellness program that we created just over a decade ago. That's really focused originally actually teaching teens and young adults about money, and we've definitely cracked that nut. We got over 400,000 students a year watching our program across the country. We're doing things that financial literacy has never been done in this country through provincial contracts and board contracts. And then we also have a second division of financial wellness in the workplace, which we've really made some great inroads there as well. We work with everything from first responders. We work with the the NPF, which is the union representing the RCMP, the BCPA, British Columbia Police Association. The OPP just signed an agreement with us, but we also work with the NHL alumni, OHL, CFL, mortgage brokers, real estate agents, boilermakers, iron workers, carpet. I can go on, because the reality is it doesn't matter. You know, you want to become an athlete, we don't learn about money. You want to become a trades, doctor, first responder, we just don't learn about money. So it's a big problem.
What's that show? You're basically The Rock. Didn't The Rock have a show where he was like the financial guy for all the NFL guys that were wasting their money away? You're just the Canadian version of that, basically.
Yeah, well, it's one of the saddest stories in sports, right? Like you look at athletes, you know, NHL players as an example, they make $1 million a year, but they don't take home $1 million, right? Half is tax, and they got to pay that escrow thing of 13%, where that goes back to the owners every year. Yeah. A lot of people are unaware of how that really works, but every year, the players pool all their money together. 13% of their paychecks go into a pool, and what they do is they pool all that 13% together, and then the owners what they profit that year. And if the owners don't profit enough, the players have to pay back 13% of their paycheck back to the owners.
Really,
right? And that happens almost every year. So take $1 million NHL player, $500,000 is tax, $130,000 in that escrow, and then you got to pay your agent. And now they're making $350 a year, and then put that player with 2-year contract that, you know, in Manhattan at $7,000 a month rent. They don't have a lot of money. Yeah.
And that's why a guy can sign like an $8 million deal in Florida, but the comparable to sign that same player in Toronto would be like an 11.5 after taxes, right? Like it's not all equal across the league.
Not all equal, and the problem is we kind of gauge our experience working with players as if they all make $8 million contracts. They just don't. Right, that's just not reality in the NHL, and you know the average NHL player does not play that long in the NHL. And I'll give you a funny story very quickly. There's an OHL team I spoke to, and a player had got signed by the Montreal Canadiens, and this is over the last few years. Anyways, he was in front of the team bragging. I was doing the session for them. He's like, "Oh, they just got signed by the Montreal Canadiens. I got a $250,000 signing bonus." I said, "That's awesome, man." Because I got my first $90,000 check last week. And I said, "That's good for you." And I said, "Were you taxed on that?" And he was like, I don't know. Like, it's criminal. Like 10 years he spent learning how to slap shots, defend a puck, whatever, and gets his first check, knows nothing about it. Right. And right off the bat, to be clear to all your listeners, well, we don't manage money here. I don't tell you at EnRiched Academy, we don't tell you what you should or shouldn't buy, because nobody knows. Right. And we don't have a horse in the race. We're fully unbiased. We do not refer. We have no financial institution sponsorships, nothing. This is fully unbiased advice that we give, which is really critical. Right.
So you're into giving, or just basically teaching people about financial literacy. What started you down that path?
Just more or less my own experience, right? After I finished high school, I didn't go to post-secondary education. I went right into the workforce and did odd end jobs, from an assistant manager at Burger King to, a mechanic. And, within 2 years of finishing high school, I was over $20,000 in credit card debt. I bought my first car on a credit card. I joke around that my credit got so bad that someone stole my identity. My credit rating got better, right? And I know it's a stupid joke, but you don't learn about it, right? And it became... And as you get older, you start realizing there's a real void in the market for something like this, right? It's never been figured out, right? People think that the banks will teach us about money. No, they shouldn't. Their job is to sell you money, not teach you. And then you have to kind of get through all this mud where people think, well, it should be free. I go, no, it shouldn't. Like, this is a tremendous amount of effort going into creating content that's constantly moving, right? Whether it's capital gains, whether it's mortgage interest rates, whether it's inflation, you got to keep up with all this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. People think that this should be out there in the market for free, and it just shouldn't. And so that's kind of what was the beginning, was just my own experience with money. And, the older you get, you look at 40-year-olds living at home with their parents to this day. And, Royal Bank of Canada reported that the average 50% of parents will still financially subsidize their kids until their 30s. There's a catastrophic breakdown in the market when it comes to teaching about money. Like, our parents don't teach us about money because their parents didn't teach us. The school system is getting better, but they're still far from behind on what they need to do. And the banking institutions hide how money work. So where are we going to learn it, right? So that's kind of why we created it, because my own experience, and then you just start realizing there's a huge void in the market.
Was there something specific that happened to you, or you just got in so much debt that you're like, okay, I need to figure out and take control of my own life and not rely on other people that are just going to try to sell me some product, and like, I got to do this on my own. I got to figure this out. Like, what was it?
Well, it was just Jay, my business partner Jay and I, we actually just started speaking to high schools, teaching kids about money, like, for free. Like, I was trying to become a better speaker, mm-hmm. and we were disastrous. I mean, the first 50 events, kids were falling asleep. There's nothing worse to your ego than when you're 5 minutes into a presentation and some kid puts on their headset and then falls asleep and drool's coming out of their mouth. And we kind of just pushed through all of that. And after doing a couple hundred events at high schools, we got really good at kind of unlocking, I guess, the code of breaking through to a student about money. And parents started calling us up at night saying, I don't know what you did, but my daughter's looking at buying her first investment property next year in school. I think it's amazing. We just opened up a dialogue that didn't exist before. And parents started saying, hey, listen, you know what? If you ever have a program, I'll pay for it. And so by doing something for free to try to kind of better our skills, it kind of morphed into this business, which was not intentional at the beginning.
So are the school boards paying you guys to come in and teach, or are you going and teaching for free and then there's a program that the parents can take advantage of after the fact?
Are you talking about now or back then?
I guess back then, and what's it transformed to now?
Yeah, so back then it was just free, just going out and doing a couple hour session, really refining our content. And because that's how you get good, you got to be really bad. Yeah. We proudly say we put more students to sleep than anybody else, right? Because that's why we're really good at it, because we test our material out. So back then it was free, but now what we do, we have two ways of generating revenue through our education channel. Number one is provincial contracts. So we have multiple provincial contracts across the country, everything from Manitoba to Alberta, Prince Edward Island, and 2 or 3 others that are actually pretty much imminent to come on board. And then for those provinces that have decided not to move forward with it yet, what we've done is we've decided we go right to the board. But it's a process, right? We have a great contract and agreement. Alberta, by far, I have to be honest, has been the most proactive province with financial literacy by far. Other provinces kind of speak the language, but they don't walk the talk. And example, British Columbia, we can't even get through to the education minister. It's not even on their priority list.
They're too busy figuring out new ways to tax everybody, I think.
It's crazy. I'm telling you, right next door, that province of Alberta has an average rating of a 9.2 out of 10. 75,000 students here go through the program. Feedback, 9 out of 10 teachers, not only endorse it, but they're like, we need this course for ourselves. And we try to break through to the education minister in BC. They won't even take the call. We actually talked to the staffer. She loved it. She's like, I needed this. I'm in student loan debt. And then the education minister wouldn't even take a call from us. It's nuts.
You've got a real uphill battle in BC. They're busy removing letter grades and standardized testing here. And they got a whole other thing going on. So I don't know. I think that
the downside too is, I mean, in the education department, I don't know that many teachers, but I know a bunch, and they're in the same boat as everybody else. They don't know what their paycheck's doing half the time.
Well, I agree with you. And you take a look at students and you have these conversations with them. Like, you know, the one thing when I'm talking to a class, and I go, all of you are going to have a different story. Some of you are going to go to post-secondary, or all of you are going to have a different story, but other than one thing. Like some of you are going to go to post-secondary, some of you will not. So they'll have different paths there. Some of you will make $20,000 a year, $50,000, $100,000, $1 million a year. That's going to be different. You're going to have different career paths. You know, some will become first responders, doctors, athletes, whatever it may be. Everything's going to be different except one thing, which is all of you are going to need money. So it doesn't matter. So this is a like a universal skill set, that life skill set that needs to be set in place. But these provinces, they're so out of touch sometimes about what the urgency of this problem is. It's like, go ask for a bank loan somewhere, and have they ever asked for your report card? Ever? No. Like they're like, and it's insanity. Like you can start breaking it out, because I can go on about this forever. But then we give student loans to students with no education whatsoever on how to pay it back.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we've been lobbying governments now for the last 5-6 years. Like I have 3 kids myself. I had to watch a 2-hour video on how to be a parent in an arena before I could register my kids in hockey. Like one of the sessions was, don't hit the coach. Like it was like that. And then we're saying, oh, to a kid who's 18, here's $15,000 for student loans, but they only need $10,000. What do you think they do with the other $5,000? And they go to Mexico.
Right.
Right. And then, you know, and the default rates for student loans, and, you know, I hope people you know, I hope somebody who actually is responsible for this is listening, because I've sat there with the bureaucrats and talked to them about this over and over and over again, is that default rate for student loans in Canada is at 13% versus credit card defaults at 2.5% versus mortgage at 0.25%. Why do you think default rates for student loans is so much higher than any other line of credit or credit card? What would your guess be? I'm going to ask you too. What would you guess?
I would guess because they got it when they were very young and didn't fully understand what it was.
I have another guess.
Yeah.
My guess is, and I know this from people that have done it in the past, if you do not pay your student loans back over a certain amount of time, they are forgivable, at least in British Columbia.
Yeah, so you have a 7-year, you can default. In the United States, you can't. But you know what? Here's the reality. Talk to the credit card. Students get credit cards, right? And they don't have default rates like that on their credit cards. But why do they on their student loan? You want to know why? Can you swear on this thing? Yep. I'll tell you why. Because nobody fucking gets fired. Nobody who fucking fires the gear. That's why. If TD Canada Trust had a 25% or 13% default rate on their credit cards, right? Who gets fired? Would people lose their jobs at the bank? Hell yeah, they would, right? We're losing shareholders. Somebody's not doing their job. We're axing people. But default rates get at 15%. None of the people facilitating these student loans are going to get fired. None, right? Oh, well, that's just the way it is. No, it's not. Like, educate a kid. Let them take a test. Let them watch a video. Give them the guidelines saying, hey, listen, man, you got to pay this back. This is the system. This is, if you have excess money, that's not a slush fund to go to Mexico. Let's give them that education, but they don't. And to me, that's criminal, because it's like starting off your life and you're getting shot in the leg. Life's a marathon, and right off the bat, you're shot in the leg, you know, because, with a student loan debt. And I'm not against student loans, but it's not, to me, it's insanity. And the last thing I'll say, then you meet with them and they're like, oh, we're going to create our own curriculum, which they never do. Right. Because it's not their job. And we've lobbied government saying, hey, listen, let's add the average student loan, I think, is around $15,000 to $20,000. Let's add a $20 fee. Right. And so what's $15,000 and $20? And if we can affect default rates by even 1%, you know how much money that goes back to the taxpayer? Mm-hmm. Right. It's such a logical thing, but you can't get through this bureaucracy. Right.
So people are taking these student loans because for a very long time you were told that, at least in Canada, to get to some level of success in life, you should go to college or university. And that's why you're taking these loans. Now, in this world we're in now, where trades have made a massive comeback, and I have a lot of friends that never went to university that are doing very, very well right now. Do you have any opinions on just that post-secondary education? Your real estate website should work as hard as you do, and that's where Realty Ninja comes in to create a beautiful website that helps you convert online leads, that doesn't give you all these tech issues and will match with the brand that you already have. Steve's been using Realty Ninja for over 10 years, and we have a promo code for listeners of the Tom Storey Show. RealtyNinja.com/Tom will give you 20% off your first year, and you don't pay $1 until your website launches. RealtyNinja.com/Tom. And now, back to the podcast.
I got a lot of opinions. It's again, this is kind of just what my life is, right? And I don't, I very cautiously, because I didn't go to post-secondary, so I try not to project my experience, because it's not a one size fits all.
Sure.
But it is a one size. There's so many options that exist now. To speak to what you said, trades, absolutely, no question about it, right? And post-secondary is for some people. You want to become a doctor, a lawyer, architect, whatever it may be. Yeah, you got to go to university. You got to get some formal education. There's no question about that. But what a lot of people don't even realize now is that a lot of companies, you can Google this stuff, like companies like Microsoft, Apple, Google. You know what they're doing now is that they're creating their own curriculum so you don't have to go to school. Because they're they're sick and tired of students sitting there at 23, 24 years old after a 4-year degree, of which 4 years, they only needed 6 months of education out of that school, right? They're like, you know what? And then they got a 23-year-old with $50,000 worth of debt coming up to their HR saying, I need to make more money, man. I got to go somewhere else, which is a huge cost to them. These businesses are saying, screw this. You were going to create our own curriculum, charge them $400 or $500 for it, and guarantee them a job right out of high school. Right. And you're going to see more and more businesses do that because unfortunately a university degree doesn't carry the weight that it used to. Right.
People, sorry, go on.
No, people hate when I say, I'm like, I'm the messenger, man. Like, watch the news. This is what's happening. Right. Is that like, that's just the truth. You have entrepreneurs that have done phenomenally well saying, yeah, you know what? Didn't really need to go. I'm not saying that nobody should go to university. I'm being clear about that. But there's so many options that exist now that didn't before.
I've found in my life, and I have young kids now, but when I tell my kid to do something, the response is different than if their grandmother tells them to do something versus if their daycare teacher tells them to do something. Do your kids listen to you about money because you're their dad?
They do, because I've been right about it. Luckily enough, it's the one thing. And again, just the reason why I'm right about it is because I've been fortunate enough to seen a lot of things fail. And a lot of people around me way smarter than me tell me what to do, and I just kind of listen to them. And a perfect example, I have my daughter who's 19 now and turning 20 this year, and she got 90s in school, in high school, and then money was in the bank to go to post-secondary, and she's like, I don't know what I want to do. I go, then you don't need to go right now. I said, you can go down the road. And I said, what do you like? She goes, I like money. I go, well, let's help you get in front of money. And so, I'm not of the mindset where I like, hey, here's a job, I'll make a call and get one for you. So she had to fight. I introduced her to some people, females, because it's my daughter, and I wanted her to meet very good women in the industry of money. But I said, do not give her a job. And anyway, she was able to find a job at a lender, at a bank. You know what? She earned like $55,000 a year. Not a lot of money, but it's not a bad start. But, right now, it's like at this pace, in the next couple of years, she's going to buy her first investment property next year, right? Because she's saving like 80% of her paycheck. And while her friends are going to graduate school with, $50,000, $60,000 worth of debt, she can have her first home, right? And on top of that, a resume.
So let's talk about that, though. I guarantee you there's lots of people watching this that their annual income is between, 50 and 75. They're maybe still renting, or in this case, I'm guessing with your daughter, she's still living at home. That's why she's saving so much of the paycheck.
Absolutely.
So if they live at home, that's a little bit different because you can obviously save more money that way. Some people don't have that option necessarily. If someone's making 50 to 75 a year right now, and they want to actually build wealth over time, but they can't necessarily buy a real estate asset yet, like, what are you teaching her? What are you teaching people in that range of income?
Yeah, like it's a tough route. That's a great question to ask, right? And it's one of the most common questions because that's tends to be the average, not far off the average. The reality is you got to keep it small and take it all. Like it's like we have this. I mean, a lot of students are like, I can't afford to live in Toronto. Well, you can't. It's like it's like playing Monopoly. Like in the first round, I can't buy hotels on Boardwalk. Well, no, you got to go around the. The board a couple of times before you kind of work your way to Boardwalk and buying hotels on Boardwalk. And, it's no different than kind of my story when we're building these businesses. I moved to Uxbridge, like that's an hour and a half northeast of Toronto because that's all I could afford. Right. And so what you're going to have to do is make decisions that aren't easy. You're going to have to not necessarily live in a great area. You might have to have some roommates. You might have to live in a basement apartment. You're going to have to just do what you do to keep those costs low until you just start building up this nest egg. But it's a process, man. And you're talking about a decade plus, to do it. There's no magic pill here, right?
And when you were growing up, and Steve's a bit older than me, and like we didn't have Instagram and all these things, being a 20-something-year-old entering the workforce, looking at all these like fancy things. Like it must be so difficult for this next generation to be like, well, I know I should do this, but I really want this. And I only live once and I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. Like how do you, I'm sure people have pushed back in like a reasonable way with you on like, I still want to enjoy my life. So like, what do I do?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great thing. It's actually in our program. It's actually one of the sessions we talk about is that, first of all, a lot of that stuff you see on Instagram and Facebook is just clickbait. It's not real. Like it doesn't take a lot to rent a Lamborghini or just see one parked and do a quick video behind it. So we kind of explain to them, like, I'm not saying it's all fake, so I don't want to project that. But a lot of it isn't real. But we tend to, and then on top of that, we see these athletes, at 20 years old signing these massive contracts or, not realizing that athlete's been in that career for 15 years before he got it, right? And you're talking less than 1% of the society. But the tried, tested, true way of building wealth is just time and patience, right? And, if you're talking to these young adults, I tell them they actually have the number one currency. If you're talking about making a lower income, the best part of it is for the majority of these people, they actually have the number one currency, which is time, right? Like time is the number one asset to building wealth. And unfortunately, most people, they throw it away, right? And with our course, with what we teach kids, like, this is stuff that I didn't know. That while we interviewed people, I was like, I didn't know this stuff existed. But if you're a parent listening right now and you have a young adult, like, open up an EnRiched account for them and start investing stocks. Like, I didn't know you could buy and sell stock in your kid's name under 18, right? You can. They're called EnRiched accounts, right?
I didn't know that either.
Yeah. Oh, my daughter graduated. Like here, I shouldn't show it. Well, I will, just so you can see this, because these are real numbers, man. So, I'm not saying endorsing TD Canada Trust, right? But, I'm with TD Canada Trust. But if you don't have 15,000 invested in TD Canada Trust, they charge you, I think, $100 a year for these EnRiched accounts. Questrade's free, right? This is my daughter, when she graduated high school, at 19, this is her number right here. We've taken money out to TFSA, but if you can see that right there, I don't know if you can see that.
Just bring it back. Oh,
a little bit.
Yeah. This is my one daughter here, that's at 19. My daughter, who's 16 years old, who works at Zehrs, which is a grocery store, chopping fruit. That's what she's at right now.
Wow.
And all we do is take 80% of their paychecks. We put it away during COVID. When they were working, we saved 80% and then put it in the markets. Markets have done well, and that's how you do it. I'm not saying she hasn't made thousand. I want to be clear, right? What they've done is they've invested. I think they've made each $1,000 in the markets, but they've invested a lot of money that they've earned in their part-time jobs and just put it away, right? And so, like, why? But most parents are like, yeah, just put it in a savings account. Well, why are you throwing that stuff away, right? That time.
And when did you start doing that with them? Like how long? So 16 and 19 now.
10 years ago. So 9 years old, 6 years old, 4 years old.
And this is with their money. It's not you as a parent putting your money in to help them. You're actually telling them based on your paycheck, we're going to do this you're going to help them, but it's their money.
Not a dime. Yeah, not a dime. So everything, I just sit there and go, you got some money coming in, we're going to put it away, birthday money, just started doing that. When they're younger, they don't even know, right? They get a check for $100, you just put some of that away. And, at 9 years old, I did most of it, but my daughters now, they understand, and my son, that this is part of what they do, right? This is part of their journey, right? And the reality, like Warren Buffett said, I bought my first stock at age 11. I was wasting my life up until then. And, and it's true. Like, but these tools exist, but you're never going to be taught that in school unless somebody sits you down and explains it, which had to be done to me too. So this wasn't my idea. I just listened. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. Right. And did it. But the problem is that most parents won't, because it's like an hour and a half to set this up. They're like, oh, well, what do I do? Who do I call? I got to send in this information in my birth certificate to set up these accounts. And it's a real pain in the ass, and I'll get back to it. And then we never do it.
Right.
But eventually, I don't want a 30-year-old living with me. I love my kids, but I don't want them sucking off my, income stream when I'm 50 plus.
Kevin, I want Steve to jump in here because he's trying to have a midlife crisis right now, but he's not sure what to do. I'm wondering, Steve, if you can let Kevin know what's going on.
Okay, and then I got to bring it back to something else later on.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in a spot where, like, I'm always been the saver. So my parents taught me, they didn't teach me investing. I've only learned that recently. But the thing that my parents taught me that was absolutely amazing, still do it, is when I got my allowance, I had to save 50%. Yep. They were like, you can take the other 50%, buy as much candy as you want, comic books, junk food, whatever. 50% goes to the bank. And I've continued that through my whole life. And now I end up probably at 44 years old, almost saving too much. Like, I've got to a spot now where, my shelter costs are basically zero. I've got investment properties that are cash flowing, and I'm still not spending. And so Tom and I kind of have this back and forth all the time. And Tom's like, go on the trips, man, do the thing, spend some of the money, enjoy the time. And I just can't do it.
Yeah.
So, like, have I gone too far down that road where now I can't enjoy my life? What do you teach about the other side of it?
Well, I heard this great quote once says, we spend our youth to build our wealth and take our wealth to try to buy back our youth. Right. And it's interesting, right? Because I've never said there's no one size fits all. Like, what's right for me or you or either of you guys. It's like, there's no one size fits all. You kind of got to find your zone and go with it. Right. Like, I've met people that just, it all depends. Do people have kids? Do they not have kids? I don't know. Do you have kids or yourself or?
Yep.
Yeah. How many you got?
Yeah. I got 2. They are, skill testing question, 10 and 7.
Yeah. And well, there you go. And so you kind of have to find that, happy medium is that, forbid, in my family, I'm the primary breadwinner for the family. So want to make sure you leave some security for them if something happens to you. So there's all these variables that kind of answer that question, which, we don't need to get onto this call. But, for me is that, the older we get, I'm 48 and, you start seeing things around you that start rattling you. Like, just prior to December 27th, a good buddy of mine who's my age, non-drinker, non-smoker, works for our company. He's one of the main guys in our company, had a massive stroke. Like out of nowhere, half his body's paralyzed. Right. And I go, man, he's like, Kev, there's anything you can do right now. He's like, go out there and enjoy life the best that you can. So you got to kind of take that heavy. And then also at the same time, as I said, there's a fine line between you only live once and you got to save for the downside of life too. Right. Because that's inevitable too. Right. So it's a tough question. I don't know.
Totally. Okay. So I kind of had this in my back of my mind. So I think I saw you speak at RRI, I think maybe in Vancouver once. And then I definitely saw the pitch kind of early on days, I want to say, when you got a chance to do the Academy stuff in Toronto, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And the tough part in your situation, as in any business, even as a real estate business, is getting the word out. Hey, man, we're in business. This is the product we have to sell. That's the hardest thing for any kind of entrepreneur to get out there. And then one day I'm sitting at home with my wife. I think I was in the townhouse. So this was quite some years ago. And I got Dragon's Den on.
Yeah.
And it's like the first time I was like, hey, wait a minute. I know that guy.
Yeah.
So you got a chance to get the word out. And that actually, was that kind of a stepping off point, that whole experience of going on to Dragon's Den and getting the word out, financial literacy? Because if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Dragons were like, we love you to some degree or another.
Yeah. Well, it just like anything in life, even getting on that show had a story within itself, right? I don't know if you guys are aware how that actually happened. It was, we got rejected.
Yeah, tell us. Right.
So Jay and I that were on the show, we prepared. So they do open auditions to get on that show. And the audition was in Collingwood. And my stepfather at the time had a place in Thornbury, which is not far from Collingwood. And so my business partner, Jay, and I went to Thornbury. And but kind of like Rocky went up north and Rocky 4, to be by themselves. And we had 5 cell phones sitting there, and we would back and forth with our friends. Like, so we prepared for this audition. And when we went in to Collingwood after a week, like ready to go. And after a week of doing this, we went and auditioned, and the producers were like, that was unbelievable. You guys nailed it. They're like, just so you know, you're probably not going to make the show, though. And we're like, well, why not? They're like, well, it's a video program. How are we going to show TV on TV? We can't see it, right? But like, just so you know, we think the program's amazing. The pitch is great, just to let you know. So we're driving back to my place in Toronto, in Uxbridge, excuse me. And we pull over, and I was like, Jay, our program says don't stop, don't quit. Like we're literally quitting if we stop. I'm like, fuck it. I'm like, it's open. It's an open audition. Let's just go tomorrow. Let's audition again tomorrow. They'll think it's funny, right? And I'm like, let's go online. So we're online and we're looking. And we're like, whereas the next day is in Abbotsford, BC. That's where the next audition is, right? So, anyways, I said, forget it. We're on. You know, like we already got our bags. Let's just get in this plane. Let's just drive to the airport. If anybody's ever flown the same day across the country, you know, it's not the cheapest thing to do, but we did. We flew across the country, and the next day, I'll never forget, we walked into Abbotsford. It's a Best Western, I think, in Abbotsford or Chilliwack, one of the two. And anyways, we walked in, and they're looking down at their computers, the producers, and they look up, and they're like, what are you guys doing here? And we sat there, and we said, listen, we just spent like $3,000 on flights, 5 hours on planes to spend 5 minutes with you. Like, give us a shot. You know the pitch, but we really want to be on this show, and we promise you we'll make great television. We'll be animated, and the Dragons are going to love it. And that's how we got on the show, like actually by that, right? And then so if we didn't do that second audition, probably wouldn't have been on it. But yeah, when we got on the Dragons, it was a great show. It was it's very intimidating. There for 45 minutes, they turned it down to 5 minutes, and they want good television, right? If you're not animated, they film like 250 pitches and only show 150 of them, right? Like a third of the show's pitches don't even make the air. And so we had to make sure we're animated, and we had all the Dragons bid on it, which was exciting. Worked with a couple of them. We don't work with them anymore, Jim and Bruce, but we have a great relationship with them. Just the show, just kind of, we went in a different direction, but still I was talking to somebody on Jim's staff yesterday, right? So yeah, it's still great.
When they make you the offer, you know, they send you to that little room to discuss. Is that just is that pre-recorded after you've already agreed to the offer, or is it actually real?
Live,
really?
They absorb all of it, and then they cut it down, and you don't even see it until a year later. So like we auditioned, we filmed in April and didn't air till the following February. And between April and February, I call the producers weekly saying, please get us on the show. Please make sure we air. Please make sure. Please, please, please. Like, we're going to have a huge party. We're going to make sure that everybody knows about it. And so that we just kind of kept pushing it away.
What happened when it aired? Was it immediately phone started ringing like crazy? Like, what did that look like?
It's funny you say that because you never know, right? And to be honest, it didn't. Like, so you think it will. Like, I mean, we had all this stuff set up, ready to rock and roll. The way that the show aired, it just didn't really explain what we did as much as we wanted it to. So we got some sales out of it, but not a tremendous amount. But the reality is, still to this day, a decade later, we're still talking about it, right? So just like anything, people think that you get on the show and have this perception that your business quadruples and you sell your business for $100 million or whatever it is. You just don't, right? It's just a small stepping stone to the next step, right? And that's kind of what it takes to get there, right? And it's like we're working at some contracts in the United States right now. And I was talking to them yesterday. They're like, yeah, I've never heard of you. I'm like, well, you know the show Shark Tank? Oh, yeah. Well, Canada has Dragons Den, and like immediately just opens up their, okay, now I'm going to listen to you. So there's value to it.
It's definitely gotten more doors.
Yeah. So it's up to you. There's nothing that beats the phones, right? I know where you have some real estate agents, like the phones are the phones, right? I don't care what anybody says, it's still the best tool to build a business.
I guess if they don't pick up the phone, you do what you guys did and you fly across the country and walk up to where they are in person, right? Because that's how it happened.
For tenant, landlord, or homeowner insurance policies, go to squareone.ca/The Tom Storey Show. Use the link in the description. Save $20 when you start your free quote right now.
Right. Well, that's to be a successful entrepreneur in today's world, like you have to have a savage in you. Like there has to be some level of savage, right? And if you don't, it's really tough to cut through it all, right? It just is.
Kevin, this wasn't in my notes. Oh, sorry, Steve. Can I just ask one question?
I was just
going to ask.
Yeah. Okay, you go, then I'll go, Tom. It is the Tom Storey Show.
Okay, this wasn't in my notes, but you're an entrepreneur in Canada. There's been so much talk about taxes and building businesses in Canada. Have you moved a lot of your business to the States because it makes more sense? I feel like you're
open. Just in the opening stages. Like, listen, I'm for paying tax. Like, live within the tax code. You meet too many people out there that I pay nothing, and then you're like, yeah, you're going to pay something, right? And I'm for paying something. it is difficult for an entrepreneur in Canada. There's no doubt about it. Like, we tend to be a little more conservative. Like, try to get a loan to start a business, right? Like, good luck, right? You're not going to be able to do that. And you put a lot of risk up front. You don't get paid for 4 or 5 years. You watch everybody else get paid. But I think there's adjustments that are going to be made, hopefully in the future here, in near future, that are going to make it a little more, cater to entrepreneurs' needs. Because we need them, man. Like, entrepreneurs create a lot of taxpayers, right? Our company's got 25 people, that's 25 new taxpayers, right? That we're proud to help, right? But we're going to the States now, not number one, not because of that necessarily, but like Canada, the problem is that you run out of, there's only 12 provinces or whatever. How many provinces are there? There's my
10.
high school.
10 plus
That's some territories. Yeah.
10 plus territories, right?
Yeah.
So there's only so many provinces, right? You got 52 or 51 states or whatever, or 50 states, excuse me, not 51.
We're not the 51st yet, okay?
I can't say 51, right? But there's like the state of Florida and California alone have as many schools and as Canada does as a whole. So you just kind of reach a point where you can only call people so many times. So we have to branch out to different areas. And there's a huge need in the States right now too.
So where does that tenaciousness to follow up as an entrepreneur come from? Like, originally, from what I know of you, you started with actually Richard Robbins in some sort of a sales role. You've gone on to be I guess a co-founder, was it, of Dominion Lending at one point in time, and now you've gone on to this next level. You must have heard like more no's than even your average real estate agent at this point.
Yeah. So, worked at Richard Robbins, co-founder. I with Dominion Lending Center, more of a partner. Like, the company was about a month old or two when I got there, so I'll say a partner more than co-founder, which was still, either way, is a blessing. But you know what? It's the only thing I got. Right, you know what I mean? Is that I was never the first guy chosen in school to join a sports team. I'm a short, chunky guy. I'm not that guy, right? But I realized when I met Rich that the phone was this incredible tool that can unlock all of my dreams that I wanted to accomplish. And I realized that, every morning, like Dominion Lending Center is a perfect example. I'll never forget picking up the phones like the first day. Nobody knows who this company is in Ontario. Never even heard of it, right? Even most of Canada, nobody had heard of it. And I was like, holy shit, I've never done a mortgage. Shit, I don't even know anything about it, right? And I'm just going to call people and say, you want to change your whole business based on something that I know nothing about? But I just realized that there was, 10 other presidents and regional directors of our competitors. They were feeling the same way that Monday morning on that phone, because that phone feels like it's 10,000 pounds. I'm like, I know they're not going to pick up the phones. They're going to find every reason not to. I'll be the guy that picks up the phone. So you just out-dialed everybody. And I just knew that was the only way. That was the only way to that was going to win, right? I have a quote in my wallet. I keep it. I've had it in there for 20 plus years. Like, are you willing to do what most people won't over the next 3 to 5 years to get what most people will never have, right? And kind of live by that, because it's what you got to do. It's my only route. Listen, I'm not a smart guy. I didn't get great grades. There's no way I was going to be a doctor, a lawyer, none of that stuff, right? Don't have the brains for that. So I kind of realized that the phone was the best way to get there, right?
And I can tell that continues, because you're the first guest ever where I shot you a text message and was like, hey man, I'd like to have you on the show, and I get a call back. You're the first ever to call back. Everybody's like text message back or email back, right? And it's like,
I'm a caller, man. It's weird.
I thought it was great. It was like, hey, it's Kevin, what's this podcast you're talking about? And then it's like, oh, okay, an actual human connection. What an amazing tool.
Kevin, are you proud of us that we followed up with you like 10 times to make sure you're going to get here today? Because at first I was like, maybe we're annoying him, but
no, I was like, have you guys been, burned in the past or something like that? But I will say it's funny because
we have.
Yeah, I was like, and I know how much effort goes into this stuff, and plus you guys clearly running a great show. Like you had many guests prior to me here. Your book solid to pretty much this date, and I think we met each other in November. But what's interesting is that you'll call I'll call Rich like 15 times, and he'll be angry. Like Richard Robbins,
yeah,
he'd be like, Kevin, stop fucking calling. I'm like, you created me, guy. Like, what do you want me to do? It's like you're the one that told me to do this. Now I'm doing it on you, and now you're angry at it. That's pretty funny.
Can I ask you about something? I had gone preparing for this. Contrary to popular belief, I actually do homework for this show and figure out a little bit about the guests. I had watched a bit of a presentation you did to another real estate office that was just on YouTube. I just found it on YouTube. And you had a part of it talking about the language of money.
Yeah.
Can you explain that to our audience?
Yeah, like money is a language that we use every day. We just don't really understand it, right? And, people think our programs for people that are in debt or paycheck to paycheck. It's not. Even people with money don't know what their money is doing, right? You have people with, I remember we had one lady come to our program. She had $1 million for their financial advisor. And I said, great. I said, well, what do you pay your advisor? And she goes, I don't think I do. She goes, I think the bank does. And I go, no, you absolutely are paying your financial advisor. And again, I don't have a horse in this race. I'm not trying to tell her to leave them and join us because we don't manage money. But I sat there and like people can't even read their financial statements. They don't know what an MER is. They don't know what a deferred sale charge, low load, front end, back end load. Neither did I. Right. And that's the thing about money is that, all these stories about me being in debt when I was younger, it's true. Right. It took me 2-3 years to get into debt, 2-3 years to get out of it. Then I actually found a financial advisor based on a referral and gave them $150,000. And when I cashed out, I ended up with 142. Right. And because I did. And so this is like a 12-year journey of me going through all this stuff, only to realize if somebody would have sat down with me for 40 minutes and explained what deferred sales charges and MERs and low loads and backhand and front end loaded stuff is, then I could have saved myself 12 years. Right. And so that's the language of money, because we think the older we get, we just kind of pick up money, and you don't. Like, think about, have you met a 5-year-old that speaks 3 languages? Like, I have. Like,
well, there's probably lots of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I've met a few. They're like, they speak 3. They're like, I'm 48 and I can barely speak English, right? And it's like because somebody sat them down and taught them that, right? Well, it's the same thing with money. We think the older we get, we'll just pick it up. I've met 16-year-olds that know more about money than 50-year-old doctors, right? Who are highly educated, right? And it's not how old you get that you just pick up this language. You got to sit down and learn it.
How do you toe the line between another thing that in sales we've always been taught is like you leverage yourself. You hire people that are better at the thing and you pay them because your time is better spent elsewhere. But with money, you can hire someone that might know more than you, but it doesn't necessarily mean your money's going to grow. Like that example is a good one there. Like at some point you got to be like, no, even if I'm going to hire people to help with things, I still have to fundamentally understand what is going on here. Is that the difference?
100%. Like no matter, here's what I'll say is this: if you give your money to somebody else, they're like babysitting your money, right? That's really what it is. And listen, I've had a lot of great babysitters for my kids, and I know I can trust them. Are they going to jump in front of a car for my kid? Probably not. Mm-hmm. And so nobody's going to love my kid as much as I love my kid, and nobody's going to respect your money as much as you do. And so I'm not against financial advisors, but you got to find the right one. You got to ask the right questions, right? Like, what are your fees? What's the outcome? Like, remember, like many of these advisors just aren't great. And that's just the truth. And again, as I said, I'm not saying they're all bad. There's a lot of good ones. But how do you cut through all that junk and find the really good ones? And that's what our company does. We help you do that by asking the right questions, right? And again, we don't refer financial advisors. We give you, actually in our program, we have a financial advisor interrogation kit. So what questions are you going to ask, right? So that you can come in and at least have a dialogue. Because too many people, they're like, oh, here's my money, man. I know nothing about it. I'm just like, you go in, it's like the craziest way to approach the situation. Like you should have at least a baseline understanding of how that language works. And that's really what we do at our company is do that. Right. So, yeah.
I want to bring this back to real estate for a second because you never sold real estate, right? But you trained real estate agents, but you know us as well as anybody. And we probably make lots of the mistakes that you're helping people fix in their lives now. Real estate, like the asset, the ownership of real estate as an investment. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's great. I own investment properties myself. I think it's awesome. It's tough to buy properties right now. I'm not saying it's impossible. It happens all the time. But, you got to have your pulse, really deep in that market and have some really well-connected people if the right deal comes up. But it's tough to make it work right now. Like here in Ontario, even, I'd have a hard time trying to buy an investment property in Ontario because the tenant rules are insanity. Yeah. It's honestly, I can't believe they get away with what they get away with. It's theft and I don't know why the governments aren't jumping on board of it more. Maybe because it becomes their problem if they have homeless people and they're like, hey, you know what? we'll just leave it with the owner of the property because that's their problem. We can kind of kick the can down the road for a month. Because, you know, you look at, I was with somebody when I was away on holidays recently, somebody from Arizona was like, yeah, you know what? If a tenant doesn't pay, they're out in a month. Like, so it can be done, right? It can be done. And it's like you have somebody eating breakfast at a restaurant and they don't pay, and then you have to feed them lunch and then dinner. Like, and you're like, well, you kick them out of the restaurant, right? So it's tough to make it work, but I'm saying, but it absolutely is. But again, like real estate, like anything, it's a 10, 15 year fix. Like there's no magic. Everybody wants to buy a property and cash flow and have that jet, and it just doesn't happen that way, right? So, yeah.
We see a lot of people in the comments of me and Steve each have our own YouTube channel where we put out market updates. I'm in Toronto, he's in Surrey, BC. And then we have this podcast channel, and we get a lot of people in the comments saying like, you know, I'm renting and I'm in rent control and I have my money invested in the stock market, and it would just make it's going to cost me $2,000 more a month, let alone breaking down the mortgage and principal and interest. It's just going to cost me so much more to buy a property. And why would I ever enter the market when this is my situation now? We can talk about the beautiful thing of leverage in real estate if the market goes up, but then the scary version of leverage if the market goes down. I'm sure you get younger people, older people, everybody asking you like, I rent and my money's invested, or should I just get into the market and buy? What would your general response? I know every situation is different, but generally.
Well, and needs and stuff, but
yeah,
it's funny. I've had a lot of these conversations. This has been a really interesting conversation focal point recently. I'm having a hard time so I look at my house in Uxbridge, and it's 2008 to 2025. Like, I think we can all agree that this is one of the best booms in real estate we've ever seen in the history of anything, right? So you bought it for 308, I think it was 400, let's say 450. I think it was around 450. So we put about $500,000 into renovations, which, you know, you don't need to, but that also will increase the value of the home. So let's cut that. So you're 485 plus 500,000 plus over the 20 years, you pay property tax of roughly 7,000 a year. So that's 140,000. So now you're at what? 1.14 million. Then you got repairs of $300-400 a month. You know, that comes in, that's just natural the way that it worked. Plus you got to pay the interest on the mortgage when we did have a mortgage, right? So you're paying that. So you're going, okay, so once you're in on all this thing, you're like 1.5, 1.6 million over 20 years. And I could sell it for 1.9. And that's after one of the best real estate booms. So it comes down to math. And I haven't sold a thing yet at a 5% real estate fee, right? So it comes down to math. Right. So if you took that $1.5 million and put it into the stock market, I think you're going to be ahead. So as a primary resident, I'm having a hard time understanding that argument. And I didn't start. The one thing I really try to do is never plant my feet and say this is the way it is. I try to take all the content. So I was fighting it personally. But as I started looking at it, I go, man, like, let's say if the real estate values didn't quadruple. Let's say it was like a normal marketplace where like the house went from 400 to 1.2 million, right? Sure. I'd be underwater right now. And is my house in the next 20 years going from 1.9 to 4 million? If it doesn't, then like, what are we talking about? That's my take.
Interesting. Even though primary residence, after all those expenses, but you're not paying taxes on the sale amount, where if you put your money in the market for some of it, you're paying taxes on it.
But that's the theoretical thing that we come across all the time, Kevin, where everybody's like, hey, you know, I'm going to rent and I'm going to put this money in the market and this is what I'm going to be worth at the end. And I agree with that. I totally agree with that. However, what we find is, probably to your point earlier, the people that get there, they stay renting and they also don't understand money. And now by the time they retire, they get kicked out of their rental, their rent doubles, and they have no money left over. So like in this perfect world, you would invest it all and stay as a renter and not have any, expenses for maintenance and property taxes and all that stuff. But in practicality, is it really good for most people to do that? Or is like owning a house a good way to force them to not have a high or a large nut to crack in their retirement, and they also have an asset that's paid off?
Hey folks, Tom and his team are using a new tool from TRESAvideo.ca to help them explain RICO's information guide to their clients. And if you're an agent in Ontario looking to increase your transparency and trust with your clients in an easier way, You too can go to TRESAvideo.ca right now and get your own custom branded Rico Guide Explainer video that can simply be added to your email signature, put on your website, or integrated into any CRM email campaigns. And if you go to TRESAvideo.ca right now and use the promo code TOMSHOW, you can save 20% off your purchase. So don't wait, go to TRESAvideo.ca right now, enter the code TOMSHOW on checkout, quickly upload your branding, and receive your new video from TRESAvideo.ca right now.
Yeah, well, those are good variables that you brought up and totally makes sense. I agree with you, right? You don't pay, well, right now you don't, like, who knows? Like, the reality is, do I think it's a ticking time bomb until they start, charging capital gain, tax on your property? Like, they've set it up so they can. Don't think that the whole program isn't set up right now. Right? They just got to wait till it's popular enough to do it. Right? Like that's going to happen probably sometime within our lifetime. I'd be shocked if it didn't. Right?
I mean, they've already started with the flipping tax. Like if you sell within a year for reasons that don't make you exempt, they charge you even if you're primary resident. So they're already kind of secretly doing it in one scenario, right?
Yeah. If it becomes popular enough, they're going to do it. If it, right now, if they did it, it's the nail in the coffin. They'll kick you out of government, right?
Right.
But if it becomes popular enough, they've got the infrastructure set up to do it. Like, there's no question about that, right? That's what they're going to do. But just to be clear, I wouldn't change my role of buying this house because another variable is that, look, I got 3 kids, man. I need some stability. I don't want to be kicked out of my apartment, right? So, or my house and then move and find another house during, whatever. So I wouldn't have done it. My argument is that, or not my argument, I guess the point is that I can see the argument that it's not as lucrative as people would necessarily think it is. That's all. It is forced savings. You don't pay the tax. I agree. A lot of good things about that. But it's not as strong of a case as I thought it was. Maybe that's where I would land.
Can I put your expertise to the test right now on the spot? I probably should have asked you this earlier. Okay. Right. So somewhere out there right now, like a lot of our listeners are consumers that maybe, well, somebody out there right now is in this situation. They're 25 to 30 years old. They do have 20 grand left on their student debt. They do have $10,000 or $15,000 on a credit card. They probably got another $2,000 on a, I don't know, Canadian Tire card or something like that, something crazy. And they are now paying $2,000 a month rent for a 1-bedroom, and that's good. But they do want to become a homeowner one day. Like they do want to buy a place, or they just want to pay off their debt even. Let's just start even there. Yeah. And let's say that person, they're making that 75 grand a year. Where do they start? Because a lot of people are just paralyzed completely. Like, what would your recommendation be for that kind of first step?
Yeah, well, it's again, I think it's a great question, right? And I think the first step would be building a plan, right? That would be the first one. And the problem is that I think we live in this instant gratification world. We want slim, fast food, minute rice. I need it today, micro learning. But this journey of at 75 with this debt, trying to save for your first home, it's going to be a process to do that. Like you're talking about, okay, yeah, well, how do we do it in 5 years, right? This isn't going to be, how do I do it in the next month or a month and a half or 2 years or anything like that. This is a 5-year journey that you're going to probably be on. The fortunate thing is there's a lot of good plans out there, which is why you see a good mortgage broker at Dominion Lending Center. It's a little pitch, but there are a lot of good programs out there that exist. Like you can buy your first home with 5% down still, right? Along within $500,000, and then I get all that stuff. There's a lot, but there's programs that exist that they're making it easier and easier for you to buy your first home. But again, the second thing is you also have to surrender to the fact that you may not buy the home where you want it to. Like, are you going to buy that home in Vancouver or Toronto? Probably not. Like, sorry. If you're, I know Ontario a little bit better because I live here, but if you're Ontario, you might be having to live in Orillia or Port Perry. Like, if you want to get that home ownership, that's just what you're going to have to do. Oh, that's a pain in the ass. Well, I have to uplift my life. Well, that's what you're going to need to do. You can't have all of it given to you. And I'm not saying it's fair. You know what I'm saying? But I'm saying that's just the cards that we've been dealt. It's the same thing in BC. Like maybe you have to live in Abbotsford, Chilliwack, and do that commute or do what you need to do to. And I'm not saying it's fair, but it's just what it is, right? And but that's what I would do, and it's like a 5-year journey to get there.
Say or you have
Sorry, last thing, buy your first property, make it a duplex, make some revenue coming in so you don't have the house to yourself. There's a multiple ways to do it, but you got to sit down and figure out what their needs are.
Okay, so maybe it will just focus on like kind of maybe an actionable step. Let's say, for instance, I do have those 2 or 3 different types of debt right now and I'm paying rent. I got a credit card that's got something on it. I got either a line of credit, a student loan, some stupid points card that's racking up 35% or something.
Yeah.
Are you of the mindset that people should take kind of the snowball approach and pay stuff down, pay off one card at a time, try and pay off each card equally? Like, what? I guess I'm just trying to ask, like, how do I start getting out of debt if I find myself in that crappy kind of consumer debt?
Yeah, so actually, I just did a session on this yesterday. So, like, again, the first thing you got to do is understand your debt, right? So, like, again, we'll have people come up to us like, I'm freaking out, man. I owe so much money. I'm like, well, how much do you owe? I don't even know, right? Well, what we need to do is let's take all your debts. Let's take, if you have 2 credit cards and a line of credit, let's mortgage. I don't really care what it is. Let's just itemize all your debt. Let's look at the interest rates and let's look at what your, credit limit is and what the balance is and what the interest rate is. And so what you need to do is, the first thing I would try to do is, consolidate that debt. That's one of the best things at a lower interest rate, if that's an option. If not, what you want to do is in our program, we have something called a debt crusher. It actually inputs all your debt, tells you the month and year you're going to be debt free, and the power of just making an extra $100 a month payment, how much that drops to your payments like quickly with regard to paying it off. But what I would do is prioritize that debt top to bottom, and you want to pay, if you can't consolidate to a lower interest rate, you want to tackle that top any disposable income you have that's available to pay down debt. You got to pay off that high interest debt quickly and as aggressively as you can. That's just, and again, it's not a quick fix. It's a process. I get it, but that's kind of that's really what you need to do, right? There's no other way around that. Or maybe borrow money off a family member if you can at no interest or anything like that, if you're able to. But yeah.
In that scenario with family, because so many people just have such an internal, like, I feel like I've failed if I have to go to family and ask for money, or my ego's stopping me, or my family's going to bail me out. Should you just get over it and go like, this will help me. My life will be better if my family can help. And if they're open to it, I'm going to do it. But then it's also like, you don't want your family to just always bail you out of shit and you keep going back and forth, right?
Yeah, I think for anybody listening right now that's in debt, one thing you got to realize, you're not alone. 500,000 Canadians are there, or half of Canadians are there. You're not, and I think that's one of the most important things, because you feel like if you're in debt, you're the failure. You're the one that didn't do it right, right? Well, number one, you're kind of a victim. I'm not going to give you a full green card and say you had nothing to do with it, because you did. But the truth of the matter, as I mentioned, like, you didn't learn money anywhere growing up, not through schools, not through parents, not through banks, right? We just didn't learn it, right? Then you have a tsunami of money thrown at you. So if you're in debt right now, don't feel bad. You're not alone. Like, I think misery likes company. What we're trying to do is not make it a life sentence, though. Like, there are ways to get out. It's never too late. It took you years to get into this debt, but it'll take you a few years to get out of it. But if you're that shame you're feeling, I get it. It's totally normal. Totally appreciate that. But at the end of the day, you got to figure out a way to get past it as fast as possible. So swallow that pride. Talk to a family member, but don't just say, "Can I borrow money?" Go to them and think, "Can I borrow $10,000? This is my plan to pay you back, and this is how I'm going to do it." And just follow it. And then if you do that, that family member is going to have no problem lending you money again. Or maybe you have to say, listen, I got to swallow that pill and go maybe live back at home for a while, right? And I don't want to, but I have to. Right? Sometimes you got to take a few steps back to take 5 steps forward. Like, as an entrepreneur, which we all are, how many times have you made a mistake in a marketing plan and said, that's screwed up? You go back to the drawing board, just kind of, chalk that up to experience and throw that, whatever budget you threw at it, and just say, hey, that's what it is, and go back and do it again, right?
Everybody always talks about, to achieve things in life, you have to have the correct mindset. And I know that gets overused a lot, but like, is mindset not just the most important thing to actually make this happen, to believe that you can actually get out of debt or build a better life or build wealth long term?
100%. Like, and you got to watch who your surroundings are with, right? Like, your surroundings are everything, right? We tend, I don't know where this has been told by many motivational speakers. I've never sourced it, but they say your income is an average of your 5 closest friends' income, right? And so you got to manage that environment, because negative people like to bring negative other people down, right? And I've been suckered into that many times. Like, you just don't even know. As a positive person, you just kind of project your positiveness on other people, thinking everybody's positive, but many people aren't. And remember, like, darkness loves light, right? And so it craves it. And because people that aren't happy and they're miserable, they look for light to maybe suck off of your energy, and because they think it'll solve their problems, and eventually their darkness takes over your light. And so again, mindset's everything, right? It's what you read, it's what you wake up to. Just appreciate. The one thing I've just realized, like, there was a time in my life I had no money. The time in my life I have a lot more, and it's great. But the reality is that the things that I appreciate about life really cost like next to nothing, man. You know what? It's taking my kid out of school one afternoon and taking them to the movies, right? You know what I mean? Like, out of school, and surprise them. Don't think it's going to happen. Just do it. Right? I don't do that much anymore because they're obviously older, but I did that every year with each one of the kids, right? I would take them out of school once a year and go see a movie. And, you know, I remember my daughter and I went and saw the James Bond movie. It was empty. Like, it was empty. And the whole theater was to us $20. And she still talks about it today. Yeah. Right. Or, you know, I put the kids to bed and I remember we wake them up and get ice cream at McDonald's on a Friday night. Right. And that was $2. Like, we just went to Hawaii. We were talking about that. Right. It's crazy. We did all these crazy things. One of my fondest experiences or memories of that trip is we were walking down the beach, and my daughter didn't want to get she had these, I can't remember, some sandals that are nicer or something like that, Birkenstock. I don't know what the hell they are. Anyways, she said, can you give me a piggyback? I don't want to get my sand and I said, sure. And so here I am walking down Waikiki down the street and my wife took a picture of me giving my 16-year-old a piggyback. And like, that's my favorite memory of that trip. Yeah. And these are the little things that you can do with your family and, you know, play cards and joy. And these little things matter. Right. And that's the good stuff that everybody has, but we think that we need the car we arrive in, to do that is more important than what the activity is. And I couldn't give a shit of what car anybody drives. A car is the worst compass to judge, if that's the right word. It's the worst beacon or whatever it is, to judge somebody's success, or trust me, it is the worst.
So you've sold your Cybertruck since you got it, or?
Never had one. Never had
I'm just
one.
Kidding.
No, you know what? I swear my wife just begged me, and I talked about the Richard Robbins event. I had a 2010 Ford F-150 pickup. You know, we just sold it a few months ago. It was devastating. The emergency brake cable was hanging. But my car smelled like vomit and goldfish crackers because the kids grew up in it, and I didn't need a new car to smell like that. And you know, I live in the same house I bought in 08 for $450 or whatever it is. Like, Warren Buffett lives in the same house he bought since 1957. So, like, success leaves clues, man, right? You know, and to me, it's like I've met people who live in mansions that are miserable, and I've met people that live in small homes that are happy. So it's not the size that makes you happy; it's the people.
I got two final questions here, and then Steve, feel free to jump in. You said you bought your house in 08. I'm not saying today's market is like 08, but there was tons of uncertainty going on in 08. What made you want to enter the real estate market in Canada when everything was falling apart in the States?
Well, I actually, believe it or not, I actually already own a home. I bought my first home at Don Mills in Eglinton. It was a condo. So we moved in there for a year, and then we bought it 2 years early. We bought it for like $200,000 back when things were affordable. Then we lived in Markham. But what happened was we had bought this house in Uxbridge, and we still had our place in Markham. And I was starting to freak out because I didn't have much money back then. And the thing wasn't selling because the U.S. started collapsing. I was like, holy shit, I'm in a lot of trouble right now. But luckily enough, some guy came and paid for it like about a week before it's supposed to happen. But with this volatile market, again, it's just like anything. If you buy and hold for a long period of time, you tend to do well. And things are always going to be volatile, and you never know. And it's very volatile right now. We've got a federal government that we don't really know what's going on with right now, an election where we don't know what's going to take place, capital gain, which we don't even know if it's here or not. We've got a guy down south that's got got it out for us right now, right? You know, with the tariffs and stuff. A lot of variables, but the reality is, just like anything, stay calm. You're not alone. There's 37 million people living in the same country that you are right now, waking up with the same problems, like with regards to this volatility. So just realize you're not alone. Just wake up and just do what you do best. Go to work, keep control of what you can, buy, be patient, don't overspend. You look during COVID, everybody, I saw this coming from a mile away. Oh man, interest rates are all time low. I'm going to borrow money off my home line of credit, buy 2 Sea-Doos. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to drive them for 2 years. It's a supply issue. I'm going to sell them in 2 years and make more money. Like, you knew half the world wasn't working. Everything doubled in price. You knew this was going to happen, right? So just try to avoid that. Things looked great back then. And look how shitty it is now.
Right.
Right. So just like anything, just the best thing you can do is control your spending. Don't lock in. If you have a car right now that's, needs some repairs, don't just give it and say, oh, I'm going to buy a $60,000 new car. Right. Maybe just make that $3,000 or $4,000 repair and not have a car payment. Right. Control what you can control. Right. That's what I would say.
What's the ultimate goal for EnRiched Academy? You're 10 years in now. What's the goal long term?
Yeah, it's to get EnRiched Academy to every Canadian right across the country. That's the reality of it, right? It's a process to do that. I will tell you right now, it is the hardest thing that we've ever done. It's the weirdest thing. Like, we'll talk to business, like, because when you're talking to a business, they're like, oh yeah, this is a problem. I didn't realize that the average employee the average employee that struggles with money takes 2.5 more sick days than those that don't. The average employee that struggles with money spends 2.5 hours a week while they're at work dealing with money issues. So while you're paying them, they're calling their parents to borrow money. It's lost productivity. So you're kind of breaking through all of that, and the business like, what, I really do like that. That's actually really good. But like, we don't have a budget for that, but we will next year. So you're kind of just playing this patience game, but we're going to get it through to everybody. There's no question about it, because luckily enough, the people that we do work with, which is hundreds of thousands of them, the feedback's been amazing. The contracts renew, like British Columbia Police Association. They were our first big contract in BC. They just re-upped their contract again for another 5 years, right? And their feedback is amazing. Right. So we know that the contracts are going great and people love it. So that's our ultimate goal. And we're going to do that without ever selling financial products, without no financial sponsors. So it's fully unbiased. So Canadians know they can come to us to trust the information.
Well, what I've learned from chatting with you today is if there's anybody that I would have confidence in that's teaching what you teach, that's going to break through and not give up, I'll put my money on you. So it's also kind of sad to hear that the hardest thing ever is to teach Canadians about money, that like you've gotten so much pushback. That's also kind of on the other side of things, but I'm happy you're the one trying to do it.
Well, I just, I now know why it's never been figured out. Like, from the outside in, people are like, oh, like, because there's a million people, I'm going to write a book, and like all that stuff. I'm not, making funny or criticizing you, but there's just so much. Like, I remember in Alberta, we were with Minister Taves, the finance minister, who's a great guy. And we were showing our utilization rates based on our program. And he's like, wow, I'm surprised more people aren't using it. And we were trying to explain, just like, listen, I said, the reality is we have to talk to the superintendent, then we got to talk to the principal, then we got to talk to the teacher, then we got to transit, then we got to make sure they complete the course. There's so much manpower that goes to make sure this stuff actually happens. Right. And that's why nobody's really cracked the code, to be honest. That's the truth.
Steve, final question?
No more questions. I just hope that we can help you get the word out there, because I think like financial literacy is it. Like I get so frustrated every single time I'm talking with somebody, and it'll be family or friends or whatever, and I'll be like, okay, so what are you doing for retirement? Oh, I've got RSPs. Okay. What are you holding in your RSPs? They're like, what are you talking about? I just got RSPs. And I'm just like, as soon as I get there, I'm like, you have no idea where your money is or what your money is, or if you're going to lose it or how it's coming back, right? Like, thankfully, you got some RSPs, but you don't even know what you got.
It's 100% right. I'll tell you right now, I couldn't agree with you more. We've met that many times where people have had $100,000 in an RSP and they think that's the investment, and it's not, like you said. And but there's so many stuff out there we've dealt with. I can go down the amount of divorces or widows that we meet, and a lot of them are females that come to our company, and they're like, I didn't know my family had this much debt, right? My dad or my husband had this much debt, or they're totally in the dark, right? Or outdated wills. We can wills. Like, how many people don't have a will or an outdated will, or the beneficiary would be, it's just crazy. This is all financial literacy, right? So, but we'll get there, man. One Canadian at a time.
Where can people go to learn more about your programs, sign up for your programs, and find out more?
Yeah, just go to EnRichedAcademy.com, or they can email me directly, Kevin@EnRichedAcademy.com, and happy to help them out. As I said, I think you guys run a great show, very professional. It's been an honor to be on it. So thank you very much for asking me. I appreciate it.
We appreciate you coming on. This was really, I really mean this, saying this, one of my favorite episodes we've ever done. We've explored topics we don't normally talk about, and you've been an awesome guest. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, again, you guys are amazing. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. We will see you next week. Bye.
Bye, everybody.